take a look at Module 17, which is going to deal with hacking mobile platforms. Now, we've established a solid base in the previous modules of how to hack systems. Now, the mobiles, the IoTs, the OTs, and the cloud environments are just examples of computer systems. Demystified, you're going to hack them roughly the same way you hack conventional desktops, conventional servers. We're going to use the same concepts, the same tools in many cases to perform the same types of reconnaissance and information gathering and exploit a lot of similar vulnerabilities. So we've already talked about a lot of what is involved in hacking mobiles, hacking IoT, hacking OT, and hacking cloud. They're just different environments. The mobile device has some unique attack vectors that we won't see in other types of computing systems, specifically around the GPS, the camera, the video, location tracking, and then SMS. So we will see additional opportunities for different vectors for social engineering. We'll see phishing implemented via smishing, etc. And there really is a lot more interesting information to be had from somebody's mobile device than their desktop any day of the week. If you think about it, we kind of live our lives through this little palm top device we carry around and check a bajillion times per day that tracks our location, tracks our apps, tracks our social media, potentially can be eavesdropped on, video eavesdropped on. There's a lot of really, really useful information for an attacker that can be compromised by a victim's cell phone. But again, in a nutshell, demystified, it's not unlike hacking a conventional desktop or server. So we'll see a lot of similarities here. Now, there's a lot of really good additional content for these modules, but I'm not going to be going through a lot of the individual dedicated tools. Again, we're looking for kind of the common theme, and we're trying to equate what we've already learned to the mobile device. Now, anatomy of a mobile attack, really the anatomy of any attack involves the device, the network, the data center, the cloud. Now, there's going to be some really familiar terms here. Phishing, man in the middle, okay? Smishing is a new one, but that's just phishing via SMS. So, okay, got it. Escalated privileges, third-party code, directory traversals, etc. Rogue access points, packet sniffing, man in the middle, session hijacking, DNS poisoning, SSL stripping, platform vulnerabilities, cross-site scripting, request forgery, hypervisor attacks, SQL injection, privilege escalation. Some really familiar terms and concepts. Now, again, don't get me wrong, there are unique ways to hack mobile devices, but at the end of the day, you're going to potentially infect it with malware. You're going to directly connect to it on a network using like Android Debugging Bridge, ADBsploit. You're going to deliver malicious payloads to it through Metasploit. You're going to utilize it for denial of service attacks. So similar, familiar discussions all throughout this module with things we've looked at earlier in the course. All right, mobile attack vectors. All right, we've got malware, which nothing new there. We had a whole module on that, malware threats. We know what viruses and rootkits are. We know what application and OS modification might be. Again, that's what hacking tools really do. They modify the system to the degree where it bends the functionality to the will of the attacker. Data exfiltration, extracted data streams in email, print screen, scraping, copied USB key, loss of backup, data tampering, modification by another application. Now, there is a unique vector with mobile devices in jailbreaking and rooting. So we're going to have a couple slides that illustrate and discuss jailbreaking and rooting. Kind of changed my tune on that over the years. We'll talk more about that when we get to the appropriate slide. And then data loss, application vulnerabilities, loss of device. When you lose your mobile device, there are lots of forensic utilities out there that might be able to dump the data right from the device. And that may also be a reason why you don't root or jailbreak it. I'll show you an example of my last rooted device and what I was able to extract from it using a freeware evaluation copy forensics utility called Andriller. All right, so mobile platform vulnerabilities and risks, malicious apps in stores, mobile malware, sandboxing. We have a slide for each one of these. So let's turn the slides. All right, security issues arising from app stores. This is really just the malware discussion. Insufficient or no vetting of apps leads to malicious and fake apps entering the app marketplace. Now, the Apple App Store is a lot more stringent and a lot more rigid about the criteria for the testing of the applications that make it into that store. Android, right out of the box, you can configure to install apps from third-party sources, which means you can bypass that whole vetting process 100%. With Android, you typically get more ability to tinker around under the hood. Whenever you've got more functionality and more configurability, you inherently have potentially less security. So Android may give you more flexibility, but at the same time, it definitely is more of a security concern. App stores are a common target for attackers to distribute malware and malicious apps. And every so often, one makes it into the App Store that turns out to be malicious in nature. It doesn't happen very often or very widely publicized, but you get the idea. This is, again, issues arising from malware in general. App sandboxing issues. Sandboxes in general are meant to be constrained runtime environments. So when you run something in the sandbox, it is insulated from the rest of the system. Sandboxes are enforced through software, and like anything else that's software enforced, they can be potentially hacked. Especially if you have a rooted or jailbroken device where you're inherently removing restrictions and security mechanisms, you're providing full access to the device not only to the user, but also potentially to malware running on the device. All right, mobile spam. The SMS vector is a unique to mobile's communications channel. We don't really have SMS on desktops. You can install apps that actually allow you to send and receive, but that is inherently a cellular functionality or mobile device. So the same old spams, hoaxes, phishing emails can all be implemented through SMS. So enough said there, we've already talked about it. We just talked about it in the context of emails. All right, smishing would be SMS phishing targeted attack scam. I don't know about you, but I get several smishing emails per day. Currently, I'm on somebody's mailing list as Kevin, whoever that is, and get plenty of Kevin's spam. An Agent Smith attack. Agent Smith attack is when an application replaces legitimate apps like WhatsApp, Share It, MX Player. The attacker produces a huge volume of advertisements on the device through the infected app for financial gains. So it is an impersonation of a legitimate app meant to subvert the device. All right, SS7 vulnerability. Signal 7 is a communication protocol which allows mobile users to exchange communication through through another cellular network or non-home network. All right, there are vulnerabilities that are kind of based on the mutual trust or honor system between operators that allow you to perform a man-in-the-middle attack, which you can intercept text and calls between communicating devices. Now, that may lead to the compromise of multi-factor authentication, where you're having to send or receive a text where you enter the PIN sent in the text. That could lead to an exploitation of MFA. All right, SimJacker, the SIM card attack. SimJacker is a vulnerability associated with the SIM card's SAT browser, pre-installed software and SIM cards designed to provide a set of instructions. Attackers can exploit it to perform various malicious activities, so you're actually exploiting the code on the SIM card. All right, one-time password hijacking, which is what I was just talking about 2 slides back, is intercepting the one-time password or two-factor authentication using some mechanism to intercept SMS or phone call information. All right, then of course, a very unique vector to mobiles. Although webcams are installed on desktops, they can be tapped and attacked all the time. But every mobile device has a camera and a microphone and the ability to eavesdrop. As a matter of fact, there's more of an ability to eavesdrop on your phone than you would think. Anyway, just leave it at that. But even when your device is turned off, if you've ever noticed, you can't take batteries out of mobile devices anymore. There's a reason for that. Just saying. So never do anything you don't want to get caught doing. You shouldn't have to worry about it. But a cam-infecting attack webcam capturing performed to gain access to the camera of the target's computer or mobile device. So just imagine, I try not to think about it, that somebody could tap into your phone or listen to your microphone at any time. In theory, all right, I'm just going to throw this out there, healthy caution on everything. In theory, if I'm using anybody else as a service provider, like my ISP or like my cell provider, I am trusting them with my information. I've seen lots and lots of really cool exploits that are really, really stealthy. Let's just say it is very possible that your system can be compromised and somebody could be listening in and you'd have absolutely no idea. Used to be old spyware applications, things like that. You'd notice excessive heat generation, that sort of thing. But at any time, it is possible that that device can be compromised and remoted into. So just saying. Every so often, we go on a little bit of DEFCON 3, I suppose. My wife, every so often, we got to turn off Alexa. I'll talk more about that in IoT. I've got some fun stories around that, where a couple times we had to put our IoT devices on timeouts because there was just some creepy, couldn't be coincident types of situations. But I'll table that discussion for the IoT. I got some fun stories for you on that one, or some spine-chilling stories. All right, Android routing. Okay, so back in the day, when my early smartphone was actually a T-Mobile Wing. So before smartphones even came out, I had the Wallaby and the Wing and all the the T-Mobile Windows OS phones. So I've been a smartphone user for quite a while, and I always put custom cooked ROMs on them. It's like the first order of business, right? I want to have configurability, I want to have control, flexibility. So when I turn iPhone user, of course, we've now got jailbreaking. And the first thing you do is you jailbreak your iPhone, because that gives you the ability to install really cool apps from the Cydia marketplace. And I remember vividly the day I was driving around in my car with my iPhone 3G, doing FaceTime with a buddy of mine in LA before you could do FaceTime over non-wireless, because I had jailbroken it and I installed the apps from the Cydia marketplace. Man, it didn't get any better than that. I'm like, this is it. I'm driving around my car, I'm video calling with my buddy. This doesn't get any better. My first order of business for years was to always jailbreak, and when I switched to Android, root the Android device, because I wanted to install Wi-Fi tethering apps. I wanted to install hacking tools, sniffers, protocol analyzers, et cetera, et cetera. As the years have gone by, my cell plan, I now have unlimited data. I've now got unlimited Wi-Fi tethering, so no real reason to do that. I'm not getting charged extra for it. And as I get on in years, my eyesight is not what it used to be. And I'm having to do this whole reading glasses thing, and running a terminal app off my phone, I'm just not real excited about that anymore. So the apps, I don't typically want to run them anymore, and I get the free Wi-Fi tethering. So my reasons to root have diminished over the years. And I also now have an appreciation for, not only do I have root access to the device, so does any application or malware running on the device. So with that being said, I think I would rather just do my hacking from a desktop, and again, just personal choice, and leave my device unrooted to keep it secure. But the last rooted Android device I had was my Galaxy Note 3. And I'm going to show you an Andriller report for it here shortly, which I was able to dump all sorts of stuff from the phone with an evaluation tool, forensics tool, on a lock screen because it was rooted. Speaking of which, let's just go ahead and take a look at it right now. All right, so this was Andriller, which is a forensics utility. This is my old Galaxy Note 3, which is the last time I rooted an Android device. And here is the report that was generated from a device with a locked screen, but the shell permissions were root, which meant we had full access to the file system. So it allowed me to dump all of my accounts, Expedia bookings and so forth, all my synchronized accounts, all my Wi-Fi passwords, all my Google Chrome passwords, my Google Chrome history, contacts, Samsung call logs, SMS messages, snippets, Facebook messages, etc. And it did that by dumping the little SQLite DBs or DB files, which is where all this stuff is actually contained in an Android device. All right, and that's a freeware utility and a lock screen. All right, had it not been rooted, it wouldn't have been able to dump any of that stuff, at least not from a lock screen. So with that being said, you may want to think twice about Android. Now, don't get me wrong, you can do some really cool stuff with your Android after you root it. But again, you want to potentially err on the side of caution. So Android rooting, there have been plenty of methods over the years. I've had some as simple as click to root. I've used ADB bridges to DB bridges. That's actually redundant. Android debugging bridge. I've used an ADB connection to install custom firmware. I remember my old Motorola Zoom tablet, the first 4G Android tablet. I remember putting a cooked ROM on that bad boy. So over the years, there have been lots of methods for doing that. The drawbacks are potentially voiding your phone's warranty, poor performance, poor security. Okay, the gains are I've got more control of the device, and I can install tools like DroidSheep or FaceSniff, which is coming up here in just a second. All right, DroidSheep is an automated session hijacking tool, really cool, that does man-in-the-middle ARP poisoning, session hijacking, very similar to what I showed you in the sidejacking attack in our session hijacking module. All right, exploiting an Android device through ADB using PhoneSploit. You're going to use PhoneSploit in the lab to connect to an Android device on the network and compromise it and get a shell, menu-driven shell type of access to it. And then Android-based sniffers. FaceSniff, that used to be the best $5 I ever spent. Before Facebook required SSL connections, SSL Strip was still working at that point, where you could redirect a connection request to Facebook to a non-SSL version of Facebook, and then perform a man-in-the-middle attack and intercept the session ID and take over the session. This was quite simply one-touch session hijacking. So you would start it up on a network where somebody was logged into Facebook. It would set up ARP poisoning and man-in-the-middle. It would intercept all the Facebook sessions, and then you would just tap on a session and boom, you were in their account. Freaked people out in like the best $5 you ever spent. Now, Facebook requires SSL connections now, so that doesn't do what it used to do, so it's no longer the best $5 you ever spent. But that was one of the coolest apps ever on my Android device. Freak people out with that thing. All right, Metasploit. All right, so like I said earlier, hacking a mobile device is very much like hacking a desktop or laptop. Metasploit payloads can be created using MSF Venom, just like we looked at in the system hacking module. So creating a malicious APK instead of an EXE, posting it to a website, downloading, installing it, reverse interpreter connection, just like you did in system hacking. All right, location tracking and wiping tools are a good idea. If you physically lose your device, remember what I just showed you with my Android device, it's quite possible someone can compromise the device, use a forensic imaging utility on it, and extract all your data. So not a bad idea to use remote tracking and wiping utilities in case you do in fact lose your device. Years ago, we're coming back from vacation, flying through Miami International, and I had fallen asleep on the connecting flight, kind of groggy, got up, we're racing to make the connection at our other gate. I noticed I left my phone in the pocket on the plane. No time to go back. So of course, the whole time on the flight home, I'm stressing about who's got my phone and so forth. And sure enough, we get home, I find my iPhone, and sure enough, it had left the airport. Somebody did find it, didn't turn it in, was wandering off with it. So boom, did a remote wipe, never be heard from again. So it is a good idea to do remote tracking and wiping. A lot of your mobile device management software will do that for you as well. All right, jailbreaking iOS. So the same discussion, different OS. jailbreaking an iOS is just like rooting in an Android. There's a couple different types of jailbreaking: userlands, iBoot, boot ROM, tethered, semi-tethered, untethered. We're not going to split too many hairs on that right now, but you have the same concerns and considerations with jailbreaking iOS as you do with Android. All right, iOS has malware just like Android, a lot less of it, but nonetheless, there's malware for every platform. No Reboot, Pegasus, Xcode, Spy, and so forth. Now, I haven't been an iOS user since 2011. My wife is an iOS user, but I haven't really played around much on iOS, installing malware and so forth. Not a lot these days in my Android either, but I'm definitely dabbling more in the Android than iOS. So my experience with the iOS exploits and malware is a lot lighter than my Android, but it's definitely out there. So just like Android, iOS device tracking tools are available in Remote Wipe. There's plenty of those. There's the native Find My iPhone, and there's probably a dozen or so of them on the App Store. And then malware code analysis. All right, so again, we're seeing nothing incredibly new in this module. We've seen all this in previous discussions before. The source code analysis tools, we've talked about static and dynamic analysis and malware threats. So things like Z3A Advanced App Analysis and APK tool are designed for reverse engineering your Android apps to determine what types of functionalities are enabled. And there's plenty of online resources for that. So in the lab, you're going to be running through a couple of reverse engineering tools. Pretty good stuff. And then it is most definitely recommended that you install security software in your mobile devices, just like your desktops, laptops, and servers. So every AV vendor has their mobile protection kit, whatever that may be. BullGuard Mobile Security and Antivirus, Norton, Komodo, Bitdefender. I've always been a big fan of Malwarebytes and Kaspersky on my Android, but again, there's anti-malware for every platform, lots of different vendors, lots of different options. Okay, now the module in the courseware has a bunch of extra cool value add stuff, but that's the nutshell of hacking mobile platforms. Again, it's not unlike hacking a traditional desktop. The methodology is roughly the same. There's also some great additional information, value add on bring your own device policies and mobile device management, which is around the configure your policies, acceptable use policies, things like that. Considerations you're going to have when you're deploying a mobile workforce or bring your own device workforce in the enterprise. All right, so that's going to wrap us up for Module 17, Hacking Mobile Platforms. We got some cool labs for you. And up next, we've got Module 18, which is going to deal with IoT and OT hacking.